Did you know? If you find yourself trapped in a cave, your odds of survival drop to nearly zero with each passing day? And what if, as you felt your sanity slipping, you began to sense something else? A presence, hidden in the dark, lurking just out of sight, watching you. Would you make it out alive? Welcome back, thrill seekers and horror fans. Tonight, we're diving into a nightmare. A harrowing tale of survival that takes place in the pitch-black depths of an uncharted cave. This isn't just a story about isolation. It's a story about what it means to face unimaginable horror. As always, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more stories that blur the line between reality and nightmare. And don't forget to like and share if you make it to the end. Our story begins with a man named Evan. A man seeking an escape, a thrill, and some solitude in the wilderness. He wasn't an inexperienced hiker, mind you. Evan had spent years exploring trails and forest paths, but he'd never been much of a caver. Until that day. I didn't plan to go caving. Evan's voice trembles slightly, recounting the memory as if he's back there. But there it was, this gaping mouth in the rock, hidden behind tangled vines and jagged boulders, almost as if it were inviting me in, calling to me, like it had been waiting all this time, waiting for someone, waiting for me. The air at the entrance was cold and stale, almost damp, carrying a scent that seemed older than time itself. There's something ancient about caves, something primal. They're places the sun doesn't touch, where shadows are born, and where things that should have been forgotten lie waiting. But Evan went in, lured by a mixture of curiosity and that subtle pull, an urge he couldn't quite explain. At first, the exploration was exhilarating. His flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating strange rock formations, twisted shadows, and narrow passageways that seemed to spiral deeper and deeper into the earth. He thought he'd stay close to the entrance, but each turn tempted him with something new, something that beckoned him further into the maze of stone. The cave felt alive, he says, his voice dropping, like it was breathing, shifting, changing around me. I swear, every time I looked back, it was like the tunnel behind me wasn't the one I'd come through. He brushed it off, laughed it off even, just the tricks of a strange place. But after an hour, he tried to turn back. And that's when he realized he was lost. Every passage looked identical, and even his footprints were gone, swallowed by the dust and shadows. Then his flashlight flickered. Hours turned to days. His water ran out, his small stash of snacks dwindling to crumbs. The constant silence pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. In the dark, time seemed to dissolve, and he couldn't tell if it had been hours or days. He began counting just to hold on to something real, but even that started to fade. I was starving, thirsty, and the quiet was the worst of it. It got inside me, made me feel like I was dissolving, like I was fading away. He began to notice small sounds, tiny scurries of life in the dark. Rats, spiders, insects he couldn't see but could feel crawling over his skin as he lay in the dirt, shivering and trying to sleep. Hunger gnawed at him and desperation grew. He forced himself to catch the rats, choking down their flesh raw, shivering as he tasted the coppery blood and dirt. Each meal was survival, but with each bite, he felt himself slipping further away from who he was, like the cave was claiming him, piece by piece. It wasn't long before he felt it. The weight of a presence, something else in the cave with him. At first, he thought it was his mind, a trick of the shadows in his dim flashlight. But the feeling grew, thickening the air around him with each passing day. He couldn't shake the sensation of eyes on him, watching him stumble, watching him suffer. I started seeing things out of the corner of my eye, he recalls, his voice barely a whisper. A shape that would slither behind a rock, a shadow that didn't belong, something just wrong. At night, if it could be called night, he'd hear it. A faint scraping sound, like nails on stone, echoing down the tunnels. Sometimes he'd wake to find faint marks on the walls around him, fresh scratches that hadn't been there before. His mind fought to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal, another cave dweller driven mad by hunger, or the desperate claw marks of some other lost soul. But the signs were unmistakable. claw marks, tracks that seemed almost human but were twisted, elongated, like fingers far too long to belong to any person. And then, one night, he heard it breathing. Close. By the third week, Evan's mind had started to unravel. The boundaries of what was real and what was imagined had eroded, like stone under dripping water. He began talking to himself just to hear a human voice, to anchor himself to something that felt real. He began seeing faces in the walls, faces twisted in terror, mouths open in silent screams, staring back at him with empty, hollow eyes. I'd close my eyes, and I'd see it, staring at me from the darkness. It had eyes, gleaming eyes. They didn't glow exactly, but they reflected my flashlight, like a predator's. The creature had never shown itself fully, always lurking just out of reach, toying with him, savoring his fear. It let him catch glimpses, flashes of movement. A twisted limb, a glimpse of its sleek, oily skin. It was almost as if the creature thrived on his terror, letting it build, letting him feel hunted. I was its entertainment, he says, a hollow chuckle escaping his lips. It wanted me broken, and I could feel myself breaking. The cave was swallowing me, and it was pleased. By now, he was desperate. He fashioned crude weapons from stones and sticks, clutching them as he huddled in corners, waiting for the creature to pounce. But it never did. It would come close, just close enough to let him hear its breathing, smell the fetid scent of decay on its skin, and then it would vanish, leaving him alone, trembling, waiting for the next encounter. It was taunting me, he explains, letting me think I had a chance, letting me get that spark of hope before snuffing it out again. I was trapped in its game, and every time I thought it was over, it was just beginning. His flashlight died on the 25th day. He was left in pure, unbroken darkness, with nothing but his own shallow breaths and the sound of something dragging its limbs, just beyond his reach. By the final days, Evan was barely himself, emaciated, hallucinating, stumbling through the cave like a ghost of the man he'd been. But he'd had enough. He wasn't going to die in that cave, broken and defeated. He fashioned a torch from his shirt and a piece of metal, and with the faint light it cast, he prepared for a final stand. The creature let itself be seen, a hulking shadow with limbs that stretched unnaturally, joints bending in ways that defied logic. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness, rows of teeth glistening as it moved toward him, slow and deliberate, savoring his horror. I was done being scared, he says, his voice breaking. I raised that torch and swung it like it was the last thing I'd ever do. In that instant, the creature recoiled, hissing and clawing at the light, its skin bubbling and melting under the heat. With a scream that shook the walls, it vanished into the darkness, leaving only a trail of that foul, acrid scent. Stumbling, delirious, Evan ran through the tunnels, not knowing where he was going, only knowing he had to get out, had to escape before the creature returned. That's when he saw it, a faint light. Rescue workers. They'd been searching for him for weeks. They pulled him out of the cave, but Evan's gaze lingered behind him, into the yawning blackness where the creature had lurked. Even as they led him to safety, he could feel its eyes on him, watching, waiting. They found no tracks, no scratches, no sign of the creature that had haunted him. They told him it was all in his mind, a hallucination from starvation and isolation. But Evan knows what he saw, and sometimes, late at night, he still hears that faint scraping sound, feels those eyes in the darkness, and wonders if the creature is still waiting, hidden in the shadows, ready for its next victim. So what do you think? Was Evan hunted by a monster in that cave? Or was it all a twisted illusion born of hunger and fear? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more terrifying tales from the darkest places on Earth. If you dare, share this video and keep the story alive. And remember, next time you feel drawn to the shadows, maybe resist the call.